The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Cameras were rolling, the audience was seated, and Judge Judy sat poised at her bench with her usual sharp gaze that could slice through arrogance like a blade through butter. The bailiff announced the case, and the double doors opened with a loud creak. In strutted a woman dressed in designer clothes, her nose turned slightly upward as if the air around her was not quite good enough to breathe. Her name was Karen Whitley, socialite, self-proclaimed businesswoman, and a woman who had never heard the word no without taking offense. Her confidence oozed arrogance, and even the way she adjusted her diamond-studded sunglasses screamed entitlement. Behind her trailed a young assistant carrying her handbag, her phone, and a bottled water she refused to touch because, as she would loudly say, "I only drink imported spring water from the Alps." The cameras caught every move. Judge Judy's eyes flickered up for a brief moment, studying Karen like a hawk would study its prey. She'd seen hundreds of people walk into her courtroom, liars, cheats, manipulators, but something about this woman radiated trouble. The plaintiff, a modestly dressed middle-aged woman named Sandra, sat quietly on the other side, clutching a small folder filled with documents. She looked nervous but determined. The bailiff stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is the case of Sandra Lewis versus Karen Whitley." "Thank you," Judge Judy replied crisply. She adjusted her glasses and fixed her attention on the two women. "All right, Ms. Lewis, you're the plaintiff. You may begin." Sandra swallowed, glancing nervously at the cameras before speaking. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm here because Ms. Whitley hired me as an interior decorator for her home last year. We agreed on a design plan and a total payment of $15,000. I completed the work, but when I asked for the remaining balance, she refused to pay." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "How much does she still owe you?" $7,000, Sandra said softly. "She told me the work wasn't up to her standards and that she would only pay when she was satisfied, but she never gave me a chance to fix anything." Before Sandra could finish, Karen rolled her eyes dramatically and interrupted, "Oh please, this woman is delusional, Your Honor. She ruined my home. It looked cheap, tacky, like something out of a discount furniture catalog. I wouldn't let my dog live there." Judge Judy's brow arched. "Ms. Whitley, you'll get your turn to speak." "Right now, she's talking." Karen smirked, folding her arms. "Well, I just don't like hearing lies, Your Honor. I'm a very honest person." "Then you'll get your chance to prove it," Judge Judy shot back coolly. "Sit down." The audience chuckled softly at the quick reprimand, but Karen didn't seem embarrassed. She simply flipped her hair and sat down with exaggerated grace, whispering something to her assistant that made the young woman's cheeks flush. Sandra continued. "I have before and after photos, Your Honor. And text messages where she approved the designs before we started. She also hosted a party after the renovation and bragged about how beautiful everything looked." Judge Judy gestured for the bailiff to collect the folder. She flipped through the photos, her expression unreadable. "These look quite nice," she said. "I see new drapes, custom shelving, reupholstered furniture. Ms. Whitley, is this your home?" Karen smiled faintly. "Yes, but photos can be deceiving, Your Honor. You can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig." Judge Judy looked up sharply. "That's a terrible analogy for someone's hard work. I'm warning you now, Ms. Whitley, my courtroom is not a playground for insults." Karen laughed softly. "Oh, I'm just being honest. Isn't that what you always say? Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining?" The audience gasped. Even Judge Judy blinked, momentarily taken aback that someone would mock her in her own courtroom. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lower and sharper now. "Ms. Whitley, you seem to think this is entertainment. Let me make this perfectly clear, I don't tolerate disrespect. You may be used to getting your way out there, but in here, I'm in charge. Do you understand?" Karen crossed her legs and smiled with fake sweetness. "Of course, Your Honor. I'm just trying to lighten the mood." "Good," Judge Judy replied dryly. "Because the only mood I'm interested in lightening is your wallet if you lose this case." A few people in the audience stifled laughter, and Karen's face stiffened. Her assistant looked down, pretending to scroll through her phone to avoid making eye contact. Judge Judy continued, turning back to Sandra. All right, you said you completed the project and she refused to pay the remaining balance. Do you have an invoice or written contract? Yes, Your Honor, Sandra said, handing over another document. We both signed this agreement. It clearly states that full payment is due upon completion. Judge Judy scanned it, then looked at Karen again. Ms. Whitley, is this your signature? Karen shrugged. It looks like mine, yes. But I don't remember signing that version. So you're saying someone forged your signature? Judge Judy asked sharply. Well, no, Karen replied hesitantly. I'm just saying I don't recall the exact details. That's not the same as saying it's not your signature, Judge Judy countered. Either it's yours or it's not. Karen shifted in her chair. It's mine, she finally admitted. But I didn't think it was legally binding. I thought it was just a draft. Judge Judy pursed her lips. You thought a signed agreement was a draft? Karen gave a nervous laugh. I mean, I have lawyers who usually handle this kind of thing for me. I don't deal with paperwork. Judge Judy leaned back, studying her carefully. Let me guess, you thought because you have money, you don't have to follow through on promises like everyone else. Karen's eyes widened. That's not what I said. No, Judge Judy replied, but that's exactly what you meant. The tension in the room thickened. The air seemed to hum with the quiet satisfaction of the audience watching a battle between arrogance and authority. Judge Judy had faced many Karens before, but this one was particularly bold. The judge could sense that Karen wasn't used to accountability, and she was about to get a crash course. Karen, sensing that the judge wasn't impressed, decided to switch tactics. Your Honor, I'm a respected member of the community. I've donated to charities, hosted fundraisers, I even know the mayor personally. This woman is just trying to take advantage of my status. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. So your defense is that you're rich and popular, and therefore people shouldn't sue you? Karen blinked, realizing how ridiculous it sounded when said out loud. That's not what I meant. I'm saying she's doing this for attention. Sandra spoke softly but firmly, I just want what I earned, Your Honor. I worked hard for months on that project. Judge Judy turned back to her. I can see that, Ms. Lewis. You did good work, and you have the documentation to prove it. Karen opened her mouth again, but Judge Judy cut her off. Don't even start, Ms. Whitley. I'm not interested in your social calendar or who you know. The only thing I care about is facts. And right now, the facts are not in your favor. Karen's face turned red, but she still forced a smile. Well, I suppose everyone's entitled to their opinion. This isn't an opinion, Judge Judy replied, slamming her gavel lightly. This is a courtroom. An ideal in reality, not in your version of it. The camera zoomed in on Karen's face. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of frustration creeping up her neck. The audience could practically feel her ego deflating. Judge Judy paused, letting the silence hang for a moment before saying, We'll take a short recess. When we return, I expect you to tell me exactly why you think you shouldn't pay this woman the money you owe her, because so far, I'm not hearing a single valid reason. The bailiff called for the recess, and the audience buzzed with whispers as Karen stood up, whispering furiously to her assistant. Her confident strut from earlier had turned into a stiff, irritated march toward the hallway. Judge Judy, meanwhile, sipped her water calmly. She had dealt with people like Karen before, and she knew exactly how this story would end. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere felt charged. The audience members shuffled back into their seats, whispering eagerly as though they were about to watch the next act of a live drama. Judge Judy re-entered the courtroom, her robe swishing lightly as she took her seat. She adjusted her glasses, her face calm and unreadable. The bailiff announced that the court was back in session. Karen walked in with her chin lifted high, pretending nothing had shaken her confidence during the recess. But there was a noticeable tightness in her smile, and her assistant trailed behind her with the anxious look of someone who'd been on the receiving end of an angry lecture. Karen took her seat, crossed her legs, and folded her arms. The silence in the room was heavy. Judge Judy wasted no time. "All right," she said, her tone sharp. "Ms. Whitley, during the break I reviewed the documents submitted by the plaintiff. Everything appears legitimate: photos, invoices, contracts, and text messages. Now, I'd like to hear your side of the story. You claim the work was subpar. Explain exactly what was wrong." Karen took a deep breath, as if preparing for a performance. "Your Honor, the furniture was cheap. The paint color was wrong. The lighting didn't feel luxurious enough. I paid for a high-end result, and instead, my living room looked like something out of a mid-range hotel." Judge Judy raised a finger. "You paid $15,000 for the entire project, correct?" "Yes," Karen replied. "That's what we agreed." "Then what exactly did you expect for $15,000? Judge Judy asked pointedly. "A palace renovation? Marble imported from Rome? Gold chandeliers?" Karen frowned. "Well, I have standards, Your Honor." "And you're entitled to them," Judge Judy said coolly. "But having standards doesn't mean you get to ignore your contract. Ms. Lewis delivered what she promised. She didn't agree to build you a mansion for pocket change." Karen rolled her eyes again. "Pocket change? $15,000 isn't exactly cheap." "For you, maybe not," Judge Judy replied without missing a beat. "But in the real world, it doesn't buy a luxury mansion makeover. It buys hard work, reasonable materials, and professionalism, and you got all three." The audience murmured in agreement. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "With all due respect, Your Honor." "Stop right there," Judge Judy interrupted. "Whenever someone says, 'with all due respect,' what comes next is always disrespectful. Don't test my patience." Karen's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words, but none came. She gave a strained laugh. "I just think you're being unfair. You're taking her side because she's playing the victim." Judge Judy's eyebrows lifted slightly. "The only victim in this room is the truth, Ms. Whitley, and you're doing a fine job assaulting it." The audience laughed again. Karen's assistant covered her mouth to hide a smirk, but Karen noticed. Her eyes narrowed, shooting daggers at the young woman before turning back to the judge. "I have proof, too," Karen suddenly blurted, rummaging through her designer purse. "I have screenshots and messages showing she ignored my instructions." Judge Judy motioned to the bailiff. "Let's see them." Karen handed over her phone with a smug expression, but her confidence quickly faded as the judge scrolled through the evidence. After a moment, Judge Judy looked up with a raised brow. "These messages show her asking if you liked the color palette," she said. "And you responded with a thumbs-up emoji and the words, 'Looks fabulous.'" Karen's eyes widened. "That's not what I meant. I was being polite." "Polite?" Judge Judy repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's an expensive kind of politeness, $7,000 worth, apparently." Karen stammered. "I didn't want to hurt her feelings." "So you approved everything," Judge Judy summarized, "threw a party in the finished house, told everyone it looked fabulous, and then decided months later you didn't want to pay. Does that about sum it up?" "That's not true," Karen said defensively. "After the party, I noticed flaws." "Flaws you never mentioned in writing?" Judge Judy asked sharply. "Because I don't see a single complaint message here." Karen paused. "Well, I told her verbally." "Convenient," Judge Judy said, her voice laced with dry amusement. "No paper trail, no witnesses, just your word against hers. And frankly, your word isn't holding much weight right now." Karen crossed her arms and turned her head away. "This is ridiculous. I'm a paying client. I should be allowed to expect perfection." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "You can expect whatever you want, Ms. Whitley. What you can't do is breach a contract and then act like the law doesn't apply to you. You don't get special treatment because you drive a luxury car or because you think your name carries importance. Karen's face flushed. That's not what this is about. Oh, but it is, Judge Judy said firmly. This entire case is about entitlement. You hired someone, you agreed to terms, and now you think you're above honoring them. That's not how the world works, not in my courtroom, and not anywhere else worth living in. A hush fell over the room. Karen looked genuinely stunned, as though no one had ever spoken to her that way. Her entire life had been a cycle of charm, manipulation, and money, tools she'd always used to bend situations in her favor. But in this courtroom, none of that mattered. Still, she tried again. Your Honor, I can afford to pay her, obviously. This isn't about money. It's about principle. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. Principle? You owe someone $7,000 for a job you approved and used. That's not principle, that's pride. And pride doesn't pay the bills. Karen's jaw tightened. You don't understand the kind of reputation I have. If I let this woman get away with... Stop talking, Judge Judy snapped, her voice echoing through the courtroom. I don't care about your reputation, and neither does the law. What I care about is fairness. And I'm starting to think you wouldn't recognize fairness if it bit you. Karen froze, eyes wide. For a split second, her confidence cracked. The judge's words hung heavy in the air. Even the audience fell silent. Then Judge Judy leaned forward. Let me ask you something, Ms. Whitley. You claim to value quality and class, yes? Karen nodded stiffly. Of course. Then why, Judge Judy continued, her tone cutting, do you think class is shown by belittling people who work hard for an honest living? Real class isn't about the clothes you wear or the car you drive, it's about respect. And you've shown absolutely none. Karen's lips trembled slightly, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. You're twisting my words. No, Judge Judy said calmly. I'm just repeating them back with the truth attached. There was a long silence. Karen looked down at the table, her composure unraveling. Her assistant looked torn, wanting to disappear but unable to stop watching the spectacle unfold. Sandra sat quietly, her hands clasped together, hope flickering in her eyes. Judge Judy finally spoke again, her voice firm but measured. Ms. Whitley, unless you have concrete proof that this woman breached your agreement, the facts are simple, you owe her $7,000. And your attitude today isn't helping your credibility. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She stared ahead, the corners of her mouth twitching as if she wanted to argue but knew she was cornered. Her arrogance had carried her through countless social situations, but here, it was useless. Judge Judy looked at her clock. We're not done yet. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to provide legitimate evidence or testimony supporting your claim that the work was substandard. And I suggest you choose your words wisely. Karen sat up straighter, forcing her voice to sound confident again. Fine. I'll bring in witnesses. My friends who attended the party, they said it looked awful. Judge Judy gave a thin smile. You mean the same friends who ate, drank, and took selfies in your awful house for hours? Yes, I'm sure they'll be very helpful witnesses. The courtroom erupted in laughter, and even Sandra smiled. Karen's face turned crimson. She sank back into her chair, muttering under her breath. Judge Judy rapped her gavel once. Enough. We'll move to closing arguments after I review all the documentation one final time. And Ms. Whitley, if you have any hope of redeeming yourself, now would be a good time to show a shred of humility. I don't see much of it today. Karen looked down, biting her lip. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she looked uncertain, like a person realizing that money couldn't shield her from accountability. The judge gathered her papers and stood. Court will reconvene in 15 minutes. As everyone rose, Karen stared straight ahead, her mind racing. For years, she had gotten what she wanted by being louder, richer, or more intimidating. But now, faced with the unshakable authority of Judge Judy, her confidence was starting to crack. The facade of control was slipping, and what lay beneath it was fear. The courtroom filled again after the short recess, but the atmosphere had changed. The buzz of whispers was louder, anticipation thick in the air. Everyone could sense what was coming, the end of a long, arrogant performance. Judge Judy re-entered, her robe flowing as she sat behind the bench once more. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were razor-sharp. She wasn't done with Karen Whitley, not yet. Karen returned to her seat, but the confidence she'd strutted in with that morning had faded. Her lips were pressed into a straight line, and she kept fidgeting with the hem of her designer jacket. The assistant sat behind her, avoiding eye contact, scrolling aimlessly through her phone to avoid the tension. On the other side, Sandra sat patiently, her face a mix of exhaustion and quiet resolve. Judge Judy looked down at her papers. "All right," she began, her voice echoing across the courtroom. "I've reviewed all the documentation, including the texts, photos, and invoices. I also read through the messages Ms. Whitley provided. I'm going to summarize what I see here." She lifted a single page. The plaintiff, Ms. Lewis, was contracted to redesign Ms. Whitley's living room and dining area for a total of $15,000. She completed the project, received partial payment, and was denied the remainder under the claim that her work was unsatisfactory. The defense, Ms. Whitley, provided no credible evidence of a breach of contract. The written communication actually supports the plaintiff's case. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Judge Judy raised her hand sharply. "Don't interrupt me." Karen froze. "Now," Judge Judy continued, "I've also noted that Ms. Whitley hosted an event in the newly renovated space shortly after completion, an event she publicly praised on social media." She looked over her glasses. "Ms. Whitley, did you or did you not post photos of your home on your Instagram account with the caption, and I quote, 'obsessed with my new living room makeover, thanks to the amazing Sandra designs'?" Karen's eyes widened. Well, I didn't write that myself. My assistant handles my posts." Judge Judy turned toward the assistant. "Miss, is that true?" The young woman hesitated, glancing nervously at her employer. "I did upload the post, Your Honor," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But Ms. Whitley dictated the caption." Karen whipped her head around, glaring. "What are you doing? That's not." "Quiet." Judge Judy snapped, slamming her gavel once. "You are under oath in this courtroom. You do not intimidate witnesses here." Karen fell silent, her face burning red. Judge Judy looked back at the assistant. "Thank you, young lady. You can sit." The assistant nodded, visibly relieved. The audience murmured again, this time with audible approval. Karen looked furious but powerless. "So," Judge Judy said, looking directly at Karen, "you publicly praised the work, hosted an event in that same space, and only after the invoice was due did you decide it wasn't up to your standards. Tell me, Ms. Whitley, what exactly changed between that party and the due date?" Karen fumbled for an answer. I realized later that some of the finishes didn't look expensive enough. My friend said." "Your friends aren't the contract," Judge Judy interrupted. "You can't rewrite reality based on gossip over champagne." Karen's jaw tightened. "I have every right to demand quality." "And you received it," Judge Judy replied sharply. "You just decided it wasn't good enough once it came time to pay." The courtroom fell silent again. You could practically hear the sound of Karen's ego cracking under the weight of reality. Her perfectly composed image, the wealthy, untouchable woman who always won, was falling apart before everyone's eyes. Judge Judy leaned back. "Ms. Whitley, I've dealt with people like you for decades. You think money gives you power, and maybe it does in your world. But in mine, the only thing that matters is the truth. And the truth is simple: you hired someone, she did her job, and you refused to pay. That's not sophistication, that's selfishness." Karen's voice wavered. "I'm not selfish." I've given so much to others, charities, organizations, people in need. Judge Judy cut her off again. Charity doesn't erase dishonor. You don't get to buy integrity one donation at a time. The audience gasped. Sandra's eyes widened. She wasn't used to anyone standing up to people like Karen. For once, someone was saying what everyone else was too afraid to. Judge Judy tapped her pen on the bench. You've wasted this court's time, Ms. Whitley. You've tried to spin a false narrative, and you've disrespected both me and the process. I could have tolerated arrogance, but not deceit. Karen swallowed hard. Are you calling me a liar? I'm calling you exactly what your actions show you to be, Judge Judy said evenly. And I'll say this much, in this courtroom, lying is a bad investment. Karen went quiet, blinking rapidly as if fighting tears, but pride wouldn't let them fall. Judge Judy turned her attention to Sandra. Ms. Lewis, you presented your case well. You remained respectful even while being insulted, and your documentation was thorough. Sandra nodded, trying to keep her composure. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Judy sighed. It's people like you who remind me why I do this job. You work hard, you keep your word, and yet people like Ms. Whitley think they can step on you because they've never been told no. Well, today they are. Karen gasped softly, as though the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Judge Judy straightened her papers and delivered her verdict with clear, unwavering authority. I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Sandra Lewis, for the full amount of $7,000, plus court costs. The audience erupted in quiet applause before being quickly hushed by the bailiff. Sandra's face broke into a relieved smile. Karen sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, unable to process that she had actually lost. For the first time in her life, her money and her social power had failed her completely. Judge Judy continued, her tone still firm. And Ms. Whitley, let this be a lesson. Respect is not something you can demand, it's something you earn. And right now, you've got a lot of earning to do. Karen tried to speak. This isn't fair. Fair? Judge Judy interrupted, rising from her seat. You wouldn't know fair if it walked up and handed you a check. You thought this courtroom was another stage for your performance, but this isn't reality TV, Ms. Whitley. This is real life. Case dismissed. She slammed her gavel with finality, and the sound echoed like thunder through the courtroom. The bailiff called for order as Karen stood there, trembling with frustration and disbelief. Her assistant quickly gathered their things, avoiding eye contact as they hurried out. The cameras caught every second, the look of disbelief, the crack in her perfect composure, and the unmistakable image of a woman who'd finally met a wall she couldn't buy her way through. As the courtroom emptied, Sandra approached the bailiff to collect the paperwork. Judge Judy glanced at her from the bench, offering a rare smile. Good work, Ms. Lewis. Don't let people like that make you doubt your worth. Sandra smiled gratefully. Thank you, Your Honor. I won't. When Sandra left the courtroom, the audience gave her a quiet nod of respect. Some even smiled, as if justice for her was justice for everyone who'd ever been wronged by someone more powerful. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed the hallway, eager for reactions. Karen pushed through them with her head held high, muttering something about appealing the decision, though everyone knew she wouldn't. Her assistant followed silently, clutching her phone and avoiding the press. Sandra, on the other hand, walked out calmly. She wasn't used to the attention, but she didn't need the cameras. She had what mattered, her dignity, her payment, and the satisfaction of knowing that the truth had prevailed. Later that evening, clips from the trial went viral. Viewers around the world watched in awe as Judge Judy dismantled Karen's arrogance with precision. The internet dubbed it the ultimate reality check, and memes flooded social media with quotes like "Charity doesn't erase dishonor" and "Fairness isn't for sale." For weeks, Karen Whitley avoided public events, embarrassed by her behavior. Her social media accounts went silent, and her carefully crafted image of perfection began to crumble. She eventually issued a public apology, claiming she had learned the importance of humility and accountability. Whether it was genuine or just damage control, no one really knew, but it didn't matter. The message had already been sent. As for Sandra, her small interior design business began to thrive. After the episode aired, she received dozens of calls from new clients who admired her grace and professionalism. She used the money from the case to expand her studio and hired 2 assistants. Life had turned around, and she knew she owed some of that to a certain no-nonsense judge who refused to let arrogance win. And somewhere in her office, Judge Judy smiled as she read the day's docket. There would always be another case, another argument, another person who thought they could outsmart justice. But for now, she could rest easy knowing that one more lesson had been taught, that power without respect is empty, and truth, when spoken firmly, always triumphs. The cameras faded out, the courtroom emptied, and the story of the rich Karen who disrespected Judge Judy became one of those rare moments when real justice wasn't just served, it was served with style.